Es un gran gusto darle la bienvenida al novelista David Grossman a la ALEPH, el Festival de Arte y Ciencia de la UNAM. David Grossman es un arqueólogo del alma que explora las diferentes capas de la condición humana. Mediante su poderosa obra, se ha erigido como uno de los grandes novelistas de nuestros tiempos. Por ejemplo, su novela Véase Amor fue elogiada por el gran crítico George Steiner como una de las más grandes proezas en la narrativa moderna. La novelista Nicole Krauss señala que David Grossman tiene la habilidad de ver en el interior de una persona para descubrir la esencia única de su humanidad. Sus novelas tienen que ver con lo que significa defender esta esencia en contra de un mundo designado para aplastarla. Y esto hoy tiene un valor que es reparador, que puede sanar nuestras heridas mediante la intimidad de la literatura, especialmente en estos tiempos. El tema de nuestro festival es las fronteras de la medicina, y hoy vamos a adentrarnos junto con David Grossman en el poder equilibrante, restaurador que tiene la literatura. Muchas gracias, David, por tu presencia en el ALEPH.
Thank you for having me, and I wish that next time we shall meet in person, here or there.
You know, David, you have said that the correct and precise use of words is sometimes like a cure to an illness. How do you experience this process?
Well, I guess if you are doing something that is precise, there is a kind of relief of touching the truth. It's hard to get there because I know when I write, the first versions will be a little out of focus and my words will be too vague and not accurate. And I feel like someone who is whistling near the right tune. And you know that you whistle near the right tune. You feel that something is wrong here. And then I try again and again, and I write and rewrite. And I have this strange method of writing versions, many versions from the beginning to the end, and not cut and paste, but really write them, because each time I write, I feel I understand something more, or I change a little the situation and my point of view becomes more interesting, more multi-layered. Then there is a moment when suddenly I strike this chord and I say, yes, this is true. This is exactly what I want to say. It's a strange feeling. It's both physical and mental at the same time. And anyhow, I believe that what we do, writers, artists, but I'll talk about writers, and really the great privilege of being a writer is that you are dealing with things that are precise, that in a world that is very thick, a world of generalizations, a world that is formulated to us by a media that is quite thick in its attitude, we, the artists and writers, we are doing something precise. And there is a lot of pleasure in that, in being able to touch the nuances of things.
You know, the Spanish novelist Juan José Millas, with whom also I had a conversation here in this festival, had this to say about writing and healing. His father gave him an interesting lesson linked to an electric scalpel that also seems to apply to what literature does. He said, "Look, my son, it cauterizes the wound at the very moment of producing it. The memories played out in your novels also somehow heal wounds in the instant you open them. It's like touching electricity with bare hands. Let's talk about what happens."
Okay, I think that in order to heal wounds, you have to open them. And you have to take out this dry skin that is created on the wound. And we humans, we do it mostly by talking, by telling our story again and again. And in every book of mine, actually, there is someone who is telling stories to another person. And by telling the story, and the stories usually are very extreme and painful, but by telling it, you have the chance, it's not guaranteed, but you have the chance that if you tell them truly, if you do not just declamate or quote yourself from the last time you told this story, there is a chance that you will see your own condition in different eyes, and the listener to you will see you in different eyes. Now, I think, Pepe, and you know it as I do, that every one of us, we have our legislative primal story, the basic story of our life that we know how to give it to others, and we use it at first acquaintance with someone, and we want to impress this person, or we want him or her to pity us, or to have mercy on us, or to love us. And over the years, we got used so much to tell this story, this official story of us, like this visit card story of us, that we do not mention how much, to what extent it became our prison. We do not notice that we have been trapped in our legislative story that was very relevant 20, 30, 50 years ago, when we really were in this horrible situation, fragile situation that we describe. But maybe today we do not need this story. Maybe we need to re-articulate it and to create a new story. Maybe we change a little the point of view and look at the story, at the text, at the scene that we describe, not from our point of view, that also traps us, that also dooms us to some stagnation, but from the point of view of our friend, of our parents, of our siblings. And then maybe, if we are lucky, if we have a good listener, who will be like a midwife or mid-man, who will be able to extricate the story from us and force us to tell it anew, maybe suddenly the situation of our story changes. Maybe we understand, for example, that even mama had a mama, and even our father, the authoritarian, stiff, strong person, he also had a father of himself who maybe treated him in a bad way. And if we see that, if we allow ourselves to be flexible, not to be trapped, and the whole act of writing, in a way, is the act of massage. We are massagists of ideas, of beliefs, of prejudices, of generalizations. And when you massage it, suddenly something that was stiff and stubborn starts to melt. And when it melts, then there is a flow, and there is life in this flow. And then this is the beginning of the healing. We touch the wound, but we start to heal. And this is the beginning of bringing the story to life, not to a quotation, but bring it really to life. And I say it, of course, about human beings, about individuals who are giving and taking their personal stories, their intimate stories from others. But it applies also to countries and to nations. And of course, every nation needs to have a legislative story. Every nation needs this myth of its beginning and how heroic the warriors of this country used to be, and how awful and devilish the enemy was. But maybe also these myths stiffens and congeal after the years. Maybe we needed them desperately when we just began to become a nation, and we needed all the big symbols and the huge stories then. But right now, maybe we can look at reality from a different point of view. Maybe we allow ourselves to hear the story of our enemy. And I say it as an Israeli, and I think of the Palestinians. Maybe we allow the official story of the Palestinians to infiltrate into our official story. And then they can start to work on each other and to melt. Maybe, all the time we speak here, I cannot hear it anymore, right? Because it's disgusting to say it again and again. But about the clash of the narratives, of the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative. Now, for me, a narrative is a human story that has congealed, that has frozen. And I want, again, to massage it so it will be the human story of the Palestinians, that meets our human story. And then when the two stories, personal, intimate stories, when they meet, suddenly you can understand that it's a human being who is facing you. And he or she, they suffer from the same agonies, and they have the same mistakes and the same greatness and the same graceness, but they're human beings, and there is always such joy in suddenly seeing how a stereotype turns to become a human being. I tell you, Pepe, there is not many joys like this joy of someone who you regarded only through the stereotype. And suddenly you stand with him, you speak with him, you see his eyes, you see his scars, and suddenly it's a human being, and suddenly the stereotype melted and disappeared. And as if you have created this other, but you also were or have been created.
Let's talk about what happens with your novels. How are they read by the Palestinians, for example? This is a very important way to see what happens, how literature melts the prejudices.
Unfortunately, only three of my books are translated to Arabic, and it really saddens me because I wish that there were more, not because of the natural, every writer's wish to be sold and to be read, because the world consists of a dialogue and I want to be read. But I think that if Palestinians have read my story, maybe they would look at us a little differently. Maybe we should not be only the enemy, the obtuse enemy, the cruel enemy. Maybe they will see other things. They will see our fragility, our mistakes, our existential fear that comes from a very tormented and terrible history. I wish that this will happen sometime in the past. I just today got a message that another book of mine, which is called Lion's Honey, is the story of Samson, that it was bought by a publisher in Kuwait, one of the first fruits of the new baby peace that we have with Kuwait and the Emirates. So that really makes me really, really happy.
Yes, because the lion and the honey, it seems very relevant in the context of the Israeli and Palestinian wounds, traumas, and conflicts to understand how we built our identity and if we can move a little bit from that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a very touching story, the story of Samson. But again, here you see a person who is so lonely, he cannot really share his story with anyone in the world. Even the people that he leads, they want to give him away to the Philistines, that they will kill him. Everybody is hating him. The only love he gets in his life is only with one prostitute and two other women who will betray him, as if he needed to be betrayed, as if the primal need of Samson is to be betrayed by a woman that he loves. So you see, again, this is a very good example, Pepe, of a person who lives in parallel to his life, in parallel to the life he could have had. And this loneliness dooms him to be more and more vigor, more and more cruel. And the things that he did are really horrible. And by the way, he was the first suicide killer in the whole world. Because if you remember that in the last of his days, he was caught by the Philistines and he was brought to one of their temples, and he put his hands on both pillars and he shook them and crushes them, and the whole building fell and buried, I think, 300 Philistines and also Samson himself. So it's a story of destruction and of the inability of one person to cure and to heal and to come back to himself, to become himself.
And in this process, the words are very powerful to build our identities. Milan Kundera has said that one character, he captures what one character is by describing the 5 or 4 words that the character revolves around. Of course, there are more than 4 or 5 words, but if you try to capture the essence. In the case of Milan Kundera, that was the way he did. This has to do with the problem of the words we choose as our legislative stories. Let's talk about the destructive or healing power of these words. I remember George Steiner told me in one interview that a human relationship can be destroyed with a wrong word. That is one of the most terrifying sensations, he said. A single word can mean that darkness suddenly opens, a huge and complete unsuspected darkness. He said that language is the instrument of man's grace and destruction. I suspect that the devil is a great linguist, he would say to me. We seem to be blind to these words, to our own words, to know what really constitutes us, and to the gestures and subtle dance of communication we have with our dear ones, with the others. Let's talk about your process to capture the essence of your characters. How many versions do you have to write to get to the core?
Really many. It's a very strange and not economic way of writing, because as I said before, as if I need to peel one layer after the other of cataract from my eyes and from my heart until I get to the exact place where I want to be. I remember very vividly many, many years ago, more than 30 years ago, I wrote a book called The Book of Intimate Grammar. And I remember I finished version 12. And I came to my wife and I said, it's over. I'm so glad. I was so exhausted by this version. And she said, but tomorrow you will start version number 13, no? And I said, yes, you are right. I didn't really think of it. She's a psychologist and she understands. And she said, why do you need all these versions? And I said, I don't know, but you know what? Let's make a little experiment. So we went to the room where I wrote, and we took one paragraph from each of the different versions, and we sellotaped it on the wall. And we went and read from version number 1 to version number 12. Now, you could have seen that between 1 and 4, the changes and the developments were huge. Then suddenly, slowly, it started to come down to very nuanced changes. Here there was a word that was totally redundant because the whole paragraph says this word, shouts this word, so you don't have to stress it and to emphasize it. Here was an exclamation mark that was really needless and redundant. All kind of small nuances that had to be identified and then either taken out of the paragraph or stressed and pushed in. And then as we got closer to version number 12, you could have felt that the musical of this phrase is completed. And I believe that writing is a lot about music. There should be a music to every paragraph that I write. I say it and I think of something beautiful that I heard just some months ago about the Yiddish great writer Avraham Sutzkever. Avraham Sutzkever was imprisoned in the ghetto of Vilna. And in the year 1944, during the Second World War and the Shoah, the Holocaust, he wanted to escape from his town and to go to join the partisans in the woods, in the forest. But there was a minefield between him and them. So he said, Sutzkever, I then learned the greatness of the nigun. Nigun is a mixture of melody, yes. Melody and poem, a very Yiddish melody. And he said, I walked in the minefield. Around me were people torn to pieces. I saw a stupid bird that got too close, and I continued to walk, telling myself a secret melody, walking according to the rhythm of this melody. And I walked like that, he said, for 1 kilometer until I came out unharmed, saved by the melody.
Wow, that's beautiful. You know, Yehuda Mihai has said that for him, there were some words, melodies, we could say nigun, that helped him to survive. Very silent melodies, very silent music that helps us to survive. That is the power of words. And, you know, very interesting thing is that in your novel, for example, Life Plays With Me, your most recent novel, it's very interesting how all your characters, in a way, are main characters. You listen to the music of all the characters. All are treated with dignity, with the dignity of understanding their life conundrums. This is about the importance of really listening to the others, listening to your neighbors, to your friends, but also to your characters. In order to reach, as an archaeologist of the human condition, that deep level where we touch the other, what you call luz, the essence of the other, the indestructible essence of the other. We are talking about the healing power of a good listener.
Yes, we spoke about it a little before. I was caught and trapped by the word luz that you mentioned. I wish that the people who listen to us will know about this Jewish legend of the luz.
Please.
It is believed that it's the smallest bone in the top of the backbone. Don't try it, Pepe, you have it. I know you have it, everyone has it. and this little bone contains the essence of the human being, of this specific human being, and it cannot be destroyed, it cannot be burned, not crushed, nothing. And in doomsday, when the dead will rise, every person will start to be recreated from this luz. And once, years ago, I had a kind of a mental sport. I asked every significant person, what is his or her luz? And I found wonderful things. Many people said their parenthood, the fact that they are parent is their luz. Artists said it's their art. A person told me it's love, it's his love to a certain woman. And one person asked me, is it possible that my luz will be in another human being? Which is an interesting thought.
Oh.
But you asked about creating a character and how to create a character. And of course, this is maybe one of the main important things when you write a story, to have credible characters that will be alive, that will be multi-dimensional. And I spend a lot of time looking for the right person. And usually when I describe a human being, I start from his or her physicality. I need to know how they look and how they walk and how they talk, and if they are making movements with their hands like myself, and how curly is their hair, and how they make love, and how they eat, all the physical aspects. And through the physical, I feel I'm able to approach the mental, the psychological, the most intimate and non-verbalized qualities. I remember when I was writing Someone to Run With. It's a book for young adults. And the main heroine, Tamar, is 16 years old. And for months, I was unable to write it because I did not have her. I did not know her, and I was stuck. And then one day I entered a store of equipment, of computers equipment in the mall next to my home. And I entered, and suddenly there was this very young woman. I saw her from behind, from here, let's say the camera was here, and I saw this part of her, the jaw and the chin and one eye. And I looked at her and I said, this is my Tamar. She looked like a tough girl, a girl that life made her tough. And she was dressed in a kind of a defying way, in your face way. And I looked at her, I got her, and I ran out of the store because I didn't want to hear her voice, because I already had her voice in my imagination, and I didn't want it to obscure the image that I already had. And then I had a story, but it reminds me of another story. When I was writing To the End of the Land, the main character is Ora. Ora is a 50 years old Israeli woman, very typical Israeli woman, if there is something like that. And I wrote the book for 2.5 years, and I was unable to know her. I mean, there were many, many words around her, but I felt I do not really understand. Maybe even I understand, but I cannot be her. I cannot become her. Even in the biblical meaning, you know, and Adam knew his wife Eve. They never say that Adam understood his wife Eve, but he knew her. And I wanted really to know her, because I think if I don't know Ora, I don't have a book, I don't have nothing. And then when I was on the verge of despair, and I was almost sure that this book is over, I will never be able to write it. I will never be able to portray Ora as she deserves. And then out of despair, I did something strange. I sat and wrote her a letter, not a mail, a letter with a paper and a pen and an envelope. And I started it saying, "Dear Ora, it's me, the writer. Tell me, why do you behave like that with me? Why are you so stubborn? Why don't you surrender to me?" And the moment I wrote it, Pepe, I mean, it pierced me how stupid I was, because it's not Ora who has to surrender to me. It is me who must surrender to her, to the option of Ora inside me, to the option of this woman inside me, to the option of femininity inside me. And when I understood it, suddenly like a huge gate opened, and there was such a flow of energy and ideas and thoughts and feelings, and suddenly she was there. And I just had, you know, not to interfere, just to write her. Okay, it took me yet another 3 years to conclude the book, but this is also maybe because of other things that happened while writing it. But
and you know, you are touching in your characters in that way. They're loose. By the way, loose is a Spanish word, yes? And you know, it's very interesting, because when you touch the core of a character or of a friend, maybe is the I and thou of Martin Buber. Let's talk about this possibility of communication, the I and thou that literature maybe can provide.
Yeah, well, I think it can convey us quite quickly from the las, the other one, I don't know the word in English, and turn him or her to become you, me and you, ani ata, as Buber said. And you are so right, Pepe, because really it moves me so much, because this is all what we do in writing, yes? Turning someone who was detached and stranger and make him belong and relevant for us. And it's not easy, because usually we are protected from every other. And yet, how rewarding is this achievement to change someone who was almost an enemy, or at least was alienated from us, to change him to someone that we understand him from within. And we do not impose on him our internal constitution, but we are opening ourselves to his or her constitution. And it's such a beautiful idea that you made here. You know, I almost always, when I'm asked about my writing, I quote something horrible that Stalin said. Stalin, in his famous tact and delicacy, said, "One death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths are a statistic."
Oh.
And I mean, you think of a person who is able to say this horrible thing. You know, what is human inside this person? As if he has wiped any sign of humanity. But I think that what we do in our work, when we write, when we create in general, is to redeem, to salvage the tragedy of the individual, of the one, from this horrible statistic of Stalin. We almost we save the individual by giving him or her qualities and characteristics and kind of an inner voltage. And if you do it, I cannot even describe how it is vitalizing the writer. How suddenly I feel that there are so many options of existence inside me that have not been explored at all. I never dared to, I was afraid, I didn't think it's possible. But through writing, suddenly I find myself much more generous and much more courageous than the writer I am, than the person I am.
You know, this has to do with the joy of exploring the secret channels of conversation of your characters. In your novel, Life Plays With Me, you have Nina, Vera, Rafael, and Gili, and we can see their invisible language, the subtle language of gestures and gazes that are part of our intimate vocabulary. Bashevi Singer has said that in any love encounter, there is a telepathic component, something that seemed to be uncommunicatable. So that's something that is very, very joyful to understand that we can go into that intimacy. And this has to do with the possibility of building an inner grammar that at the end is a shared grammar.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel, Pepe, that your questions will be more interesting than my answers, but I'll try.
No, please.
I will try. Yes, there is, of course, an intimacy, and sometimes when we want to describe something that there is no word for, and we feel that we are short-handed here, that something is missing. And then if we add another word to this first word, and suddenly there is this spark, electricity. We put two words that were never put together before by anyone, any writer, any poet. And at first sight, it looked strange. How is it possible? I can give you examples, but in Hebrew, so it will not ring a bell. But if you do it and suddenly, we breathe differently. It was Bruno Schulz, the writer that I love and mourn until today, the Jewish Polish writer who was murdered cruelly in the time of the Shoah. And he said that our language was in the darkness of days, years and years ago. It was like a huge snake that was cut to thousands of pieces. These are the words, and they started to spread, and now they are looking for each other in the dark. And I think that whenever we put together these two words that were not meant to be put together, but they actually probably were next to each other in this mythological snake of Bruno Schulz, suddenly they realize each other, and there is this spark, and there is this electricity going. But also, I think about the word intimacy, that we can really achieve it through the words that we use. If we allow ourselves, if we are not afraid, to become more and more personal, more and more exposed, more and more vulnerable, and willing to be heard as well, then I think the reader feels it. The reader feels that we are taking the chance and the risk.
This intimacy can be captured, and it's a great joy to see how what I think that it was not possible to convey, you are conveying to me. So that means that literature is a shared solitude.
That's beautiful. Rilke said that love is to protect the solitude of your beloved one. And I think, always I have the feeling that if, let's say, 1 million people are reading the same newspaper at the same moment, they all feel that they are glued together by the formulation, by the vocabulary, by all kind of qualities or disqualities of the newspaper. The newspapers, they want us to be the same. They want us to feel all the same. While if 100 people are reading a book, the same book at the same time, this book reads them differently. Each one of them is being read by the book in a different way because there is enough time and enough space between the words, between the occurrences. There is places that you just want to be with capital B, and you do not have to digest it immediately. And if you allow yourself to be with the book, then you might be lucky and feel this intimacy. The book will evocate things inside you that could not have been evocated otherwise. Suddenly you become different. You know, primal things are howling in you against the moon, so to say. Things that you could have never felt before. And really, the good reader is one who is not afraid of being exposed like that. And I know myself how shocked I am sometimes when I finish a book that really changed me, that really discovered to me things about myself that I didn't know. That sometimes there was almost like a verdict against myself, which, by the way, happens also when I write. Sometimes I write a sentence and here there is a verdict against me. Here there is something that tells me very tough things about myself, and I didn't know that this insight existed in me. I didn't know that it's part of me.
You know, that's very interesting because it has to do with what we usually see with the edition of reality we make, no? One very interesting thing about your most recent novel is that there is a documental, a filming that is being taken around Vera, one of your main characters. And for having this story, this needs the work of a continuist that allows us to see some fragments of the story that don't we know how to integrate and to take the clues here and there to integrate. A novel works for a reader maybe in a similar way. It gives some kind of mirror of a structure of our own stories. It's a mirror to the novel of our life.
But it creates a kind of a sequence that gives reasoning to things in our life. But I always say, you know, we have to be very careful. A novel does not or should not solve riddles. Because if it solves riddles and if it comes out, if you come out from the back cover of a book and you have a conclusion, a strict conclusion, something is wrong here. Because a good book, I think, should leave you with some doubts. And there is never only one answer to the questions that our life asks us. Life is so complicated and so multi-layered. And we know now, you mentioned archaeologists before, we know that under every human story, there is another human story, and under that, another one, and another one, and another. This is the human archaeology. And what I believe we should come out of a book with is this idea that we are so many. Each one of us is so many, men or women. There's so many options inside us, and usually we waste this treasure. We adhere to one option of us. We adhere to one biography from which we stress some elements and forget the others. We have one worldview, this is natural, one or two languages with what we articulate reality to ourselves. But there is still so much more than that, so many more nuances. And the great present gift of writing is that you can be with capital B, you can be so many more human beings, and they bring out of you things that you never knew existed. I remember I wrote about a dog in Someone to Run With, and I became this dog. Or I wrote, every character that I wrote, you know, an Israeli officer, an Arab storyteller, a commander of an extermination camp, which, by the way, was the most difficult thing for me to write because, I mean, it's just the antipode of myself and just to think of this murderer and what he has committed and to try to become him, to try to bereft myself from all defense mechanism and trying to understand what or how can it be that a person wipes out so many human parts of himself in order to be able to wipe out so many other human beings. And I cannot say I know now how to become a Nazi, but I say I know how to protect myself from those attractions of being very vigor, very powerful, very cruel, ignoring the consequences of what I do. I can feel it from time to time. I don't like it, but I can feel it. And I also learned when I wrote Sea and the Love about the Shoah, about the ability to live after the Shoah. I remember it was so important for me to put myself in the place of one of the victims of the Jews in an extermination camp and ask myself, how could I have protected my individuality and my idiosyncrasy in a place that erased every sign of idiosyncrasy or personality or intimacy or secrets or talents or relationship. And it was important for me to know what is the thing that makes me me, that makes me myself. What is the thing in me, the last thing that if it still remains with me, I still remain human and I still remain myself. And I formulated the answer. And in a way, the whole book, Sea and the Love, formulates this answer. And this book tries to place something solid against the horrible phenomena of Nazism, the horrible phenomena of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. All this book is a struggle for humanity and for the richness of life and creativity and love and sex. Like when I say it, I think you did not ask me, Pepe, but I will answer. I lost a son, you know that we lost our son Uri in war, almost 15 years ago in the war against Lebanon. He was killed while he was in a combat. And I was writing then the book about the woman who escapes the news.
Yes.
And in a strange way, I knew about the notifiers of the military who comes to notify the death of your beloved one, because I made a research with them, with the same people, before it happened to me. And when he died, even after 15 years, it's hard for me to express this word. My friends A.B. Yoshua and Amos Oz came to the Shiva, to the 7 days of lamenting. And they knew exactly what I was writing about, because we kept telling each other what we are writing. And I said, I'm afraid I will not be able to save the book. And one of them, I think it was A.B. Yoshua, one of the greatest writers, he said, the book will save you. And right he was, because after the Shiva, immediately I went back to writing. And I went back to create my characters. And it was very hard, because at such a time, nothing is taken for granted, not even staying alive. Everything is being devastated, everything has been crushed. And yet suddenly I had this pulse of responsibility to my characters. And I felt that if I am not there to feed them, they will die, they will dry up and being finished. And slowly, the ability to infuse into them life and love and sexuality and humor and kind of biography. The fact that I was able to feed them suddenly fed me back, gave me back energy and creativity and passion. So in a sense, I can say that the book have saved me, as A.B. Yoshua said, the book have saved me. And I will never forget this period, when, as I said, nothing was taken for granted, only the story, only the responsibility for this story.
And the book has saved you, and you don't know how it touches other lives, how it influences other lives, but there is that effect there. in your most recent novel, there is an interplay of the characters you explore with what happens in real life. And there we can glimpse an opportunity of the process of healing of second chances in real life. You didn't believe in second chances, but like one of your characters says, is it possible to correct a little bit the past?
It's possible. It's possible to tell it a little differently. It is important to understand why people were almost forced to make their mistakes, like in this book, Life Plays With Me. There is a tragic, huge mistake that influenced the life of 3 generations. Maybe we cannot really cure such wounds, but we can move more freely around these wounds. We can move more flexibly. We are not trapped by them, and therefore we are not victims of them. And I think, you know, I hardly believe in second chance, but I believe in second or possible flexibility and melting of what was stiff and rigid and motionless. And I also learned something from writing. You said second chance. I don't believe in afterlife, for example. Many people believe in afterlife, and I know that had I believed, probably my grief of my son would have been different.
Yes.
But I don't believe. One knows exactly what happens behind this wall that separates between life and death. We don't know what is happening after life, and I believe nothing happens. But as a very secular person, I learned something, that there is one way that we can be simultaneously in death and in life. We can be simultaneously at the same time in total nothingness, in total void of death, and with the total wholeness of life and vitality. And this place is art. It's the only place for me that the two things can coexist: art, literature, poetry, theater, cinema, music, sculpture, everything. But when you do it right, you touch the place where the two opponent and contradictory entities, life and death, where they merge into each other, and there is something new. There is some new insight or some more understanding.
Finally, you have said that art can be seen as an anchor to the future. And in this anchor, the healing of our children is crucial. How is that imagination, reading stories to our children at bedtime, can help us to dissipate fears and to open the children's curiosity and joy?
Thank you for this question, Pepe. It's wonderful to end with that, because when I write my books for children, when I say children, I really mean 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. I think I wrote 20 of them. And when I write a story for children, I write a story for a child, actually, for a child and his parent. And I write for this scenery where the parent and the child are sitting together at bed, and the father or the mother reads to the child and hugs him and keeps him near. And there is this feeling of unique moment, very warm, very intimate, very personal moment. And I always think that the night for the child is quite tough, because it doesn't really know what's going on. The things throw shadows that are frightening. The sleeve of a shirt can look like a trunk of an elephant. There are voices coming from other rooms where his parents and his older siblings are talking, and the echo is different. And the baby can have a glimpse of how life looked without him, and this is also frightening. Night brings dreams, and children do not necessarily understand the machinery of the dreams, and they are surprised that their parents cannot enter the dream and save them from all kind of nightmares. yes, dreams and nightmares are terribly frightening. So all in all, the night is a very shaky ground. And I want the child to enter this ground, this territory with much more confidence and relief. And I want him or her to be protected by humor, by a language that maybe he doesn't know or she doesn't know all the words, but he feels that there is kind of exotic element to these words. I remember my father reading to me when I was 3 and 4, and there were many words I did not understand, especially back then in the 50s, when the Hebrew reinvented itself. And so even the children books were written in such a high language that it was hard to understand, but I felt that there is something mysterious and some secret that I want to decode, and I don't want my father to decode it to me. I want to do it myself. So when I write for children, I think of this little familial, Heimish home scene. And I always, when I speak with young parents, I tell them how important it is to tell these stories, not to just stick an iPad at the hand of the child and to tell him or her, you go and choose yourself Peppa the Pig or whatever, all kind of things for children. No, be there with yourself, be there with your body and soul and your smell, and let them feel this intimacy of yours.
Listen to the nigun, to the melody of our own lives. David Grossman, the writer Bruno Schulz has said that we need to mature towards infancy, and that's what your compassionate eyes and literature does. It helps us to restore the mystery that each life has, the mystery of intimacy. That is very, very healing. Thank you very much for your presence in the ALEPH Festival organized by UNAM. Muchas gracias de todo corazón. A very warm shalom.
Thank you, Pepe, for having me. Thank you, all the people who are watching at us. And as I said, hopefully once I will come in person and be there with you. I really want to do it. Thank you and shalom. Bye-bye. Shalom.
Shalom.